Hello everyone, this is Leon Cruz with our Intense Apex Alpha Male podcast, episode number 4. And for today's podcast, we're going to be talking to Miguel Jimenez from Shield of the Sun. And this is our second interview with Miguel Jimenez. You can find our first one over at www.intenseapexalphamale.com, or you can find it on my YouTube channel. Just go into the YouTube search engine and type in Leon Cruz channel, and you'll be able to see it there as well. So that would be episode number 3 of our podcast, but our first interview with Michael Hur. And this is our fourth, episode number 4 in the podcast genre, and our second interview with Michael Hur. And today we're going to be discussing the Nazis, Hitler, the Nazis, and the occult. So we'll be discussing that. So please stay tuned. I stand corrected. Our interview with Michael Hur, Miguel Jimenez, from Shield of the Sun, was episode number 2. This is episode number 4. So please stay tuned. All right. So this is our second interview, right? And for today, we have a particular topic. But before I begin with that, I want to say that I'm really enjoying the videos you're putting out. Now, I noticed you have you're doing 2 different topics right now. You're doing the words of Jesus and ancient technology.
That's correct.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the one with the monsters. And I went over that with my Bible study group. And once I described these things to them, they looked at me like as if I was one of those monsters.
That's a difficult one for people to understand. I mean, it's like real difficult for them, because I think that one you just mentioned, there was another congregation that told me a similar thing you just told me, that it affected the eldership. They really appreciated it, because their level of knowledge is higher, but the students, some were just so uncomfortable with it. That so much of it was like, because they couldn't really wrap their heads around it, it just like either scared them, or they were more, aware of it, or they were just like, I don't want to believe that. I can't believe that.
Yeah.
Or they were just insistent of it, So, but I pretty much figured that is going to be the reaction, in terms of the fact that I just teach to people that know this truth, but I also understand other people will see it. But, the choice is theirs.
Yeah, it's basically a choice. A lot of people are in a comfort zone. They're not aware that there's a lot going on. Like I said in the first interview with you, you did a fantastic job in going over the 4th and 5th dimensions and how these things are just as active as our 3-dimensional world.
Yeah, it is a culmination of the end of days, where there would be this resurgence of things biblically, like in the book of Ezekiel and the book of Jeremiah, it talks about certain places becoming decimated by war, but yet becoming a haunt for and these are the words it will quote, a haunt for dragons, or a haunt for demons, or a haunt for other types of apparition, as an example of like a curse or a plague, or an example of a sign. So one of the things I noticed with a lot of these creatures that we started having more resurgence lately, was the fact that they seem to correlate with the times that we're in. So I really came to understand that these things are going to become more populated over time. And then in time, they just won't be able to deny it. So right now we're living in a time where we're living in a country that is number 1 in suppression of information. We're living in a country where our youth is constantly mind controlled,
right?
Constantly gridded to that mainstream media. They rather believe television than reality, and because television is comfortable, like you said, a comfort zone. But when they realize that one day they got to step out of the comfort zone, just like the Bible said, My people die due to lack of knowledge.
Right.
So those knowledgeable are going to be more stronger than those that are not.
Right. Which leads us to our topic today. One of the interesting things I want to discuss with you, because I know you have a boatload of knowledge of these things. You alluded a couple of minutes ago to our country holding back information. Now, a lot of the stuff our country is engaged in is because of Operation Paperclip, which took place after World War II, which is the Nazi scientists were given nice homes and everything, so that this country, the shadow part of the government, can get the knowledge or the type of science that they were practicing. So for today's topic, I want to discuss with you Hitler, Nazis, and the occult. And I want you to talk to us about good old Schnickelgooble. That was Hitler's. That was his original name.
I can definitely do that.
Okay, so tell me, Michael. We understand that Hitler came into power in 1935. Okay, am I correct on that? I think I am. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
1935 is when he became what you would call a worldwide influential leader. 1932 is when he announced chancellor. 1928 is when he first made his public appearance. So yeah, you're pretty much right. 1935 was the year of his rise. It was the year that America, even Time, I believe it was Time magazine, made a Man of the Year. So that's pretty much correct.
Okay, and we also understand that this country had a lot. They actually funded him as well. The shadow part of the government, which are the bankers and all that, actually funded him. We know that Gerald Ford was an anti-Semite and also built a lot of their tanks and had his factories over there. So to begin with, the Hitler that we know and we've learned in school is the Hitler we've read about in the history books. But he was also involved heavily in the occult, talking to demons and spirits, right? So let's begin with that. What do we know about that? Tell us what you know about that.
Well, what happened with Hitler was he became an occultist at a young age, but he was like a dabbler when he got into college and with the painting, until he met a man named Dietrich Eckhart. Dietrich Eckhart was the man who brought him into the Thule Society, because what Dietrich had on Hitler was his real bloodlines, his real heritage, because there was a controversy involving his mother being knocked up by a Rothschild. Because to get into the Thule Society, to understand who's in the Thule Society, princes, princesses, baristiners, barons, royals, judges, lawyers, doctors, physicians, the elite. Not painters, not people from college in terms of that type of society. They don't take anyone from middle society. They don't take anyone from low society, what we call common society or working man society. Where Hitler was like somewhere in between those two societies. In fact, he couldn't even survive in common society. He couldn't even be a working man. And in the other society, he just wasn't good enough to really achieve that. So for some reason, the elitists of the world brought him in to the Thule Society. That is a documented fact. It's documented in Austria. It's documented in Germany. It's documented in England. It is a documented fact. And one of the things, or the conditions to be part of the Thule Society, is that your bloodlines have to be part of the elitists. So whatever Dietrich had, it was enough to convince them that he was telling the truth about Hitler. So Hitler gets reacquainted with his other family, a family he never even knew about. And that family introduced him to hardcore occultism. People can always track back on the Thule Society itself. The Thule Society is one of those offshoot societies of the Theophilosophical Society, in California. It also connects with a lot of the New Age temples in India. And basically, it is a cult that practices deep magic rituals where they believe in a lot of spiritual energy, where they worship a goddess of forces. And in this occult, you learn many variations of all the ancient occults, and it's put under a form of the Thule, where the Thule is like the ruling head of all elemental occults. It is the form of witchcraft, but it is the culmination of all religions folding under its doctrine. And Hitler believed it was his mission to bring about this religion as the worldwide religion. His purpose, in what he was told, was to bring about the religion of his master, the one that we would know in the Bible to be the Antichrist.
Oh, okay. Right, correct. The Antichrist. Now, he also believed that the Aryan race was the master race. Now, based on some studies that I've done, we understand that they are the Nordics. These are a group of quote unquote aliens. We know demons disguised as this. Do you believe that it's possible that along with his occult practices, these entities presented themselves to him and told him these things?
The way that happened, and it happened on a single day, and it happened, I believe, in 1927 was the year it happened. Hitler was at a meeting, and there were two leading witches at this meeting. These two witches at the time were quite popular in the underground occult. And what happened was, during the ritual, these two became possessed. When they became possessed, they were having a basically general argument about who was going to take over the Nationalist Society and who was going to basically initialize plans for the next chancellor. But they were arguing about who's going to be the chancellor. And basically, when these two were possessed, one of them started writing down blueprints. And what she started writing down was ships, basic advanced technology, where to find them, how to build them, how to acquire them. The second thing she named was the chancellor, who it's going to be. She named Adolf Hitler. The second witch, who was possessed, would have to basically verify what the first witch says. And in her possession, she verifies the same. So Hitler receives two witnesses from two leading witches declaring him as the one Satan chose to be the chancellor. Since the Thrill Society was so zealous for Satan, they adhered to the advice of the witches, and at that point, Hitler was initialized. When he was initialized, that is when Satan came into him. That is when Satan started to have a personal relationship with them in a much more personal way. And this is how Hitler converses with Satan. And Satan is literally instructing him, step by step, as to what to do from here on out. And that is the account of when he became more spiritually in tune with Satan. The other accounts was when he started doing his speeches. He had a very funny way of just requiring very private time. He didn't want anybody in the hall when he was there. And he used to do these strange hand movements where he would just move his hands in an artistic way because he was measuring every word, every statement he would say. The other problem was his voice and his basically his presence. He'd become like a living microphone, you know. And it became very apparent, even from people around him, that there was another spirit to him every time he spoke, that it really enhanced his oratorial skills and made everyone mesmerized in the room. He would practice it and practice it and practice it, and the feeling that people would get would be like this coldness, this chill. They knew he was showing signs that he was something more. In terms of what he had inside him, he was just demonically possessed, but that's how they saw it. So, in the sense of that, he was demonically possessed. And then if you read his book, which is a very disgusting book, I had to read it once, don't want to read it again. It basically, he does describe an experience where he called the Aryan masters. How he viewed Satan was, he didn't call him Satan. He didn't call them under those terms. He would say Christians called them Satan. What he called them was the Aryan gods. He believed they were alien masters, basically. Oh. And the descendants of his race, as he called that, because that's what they sold him on. So when they came to him, they basically instructed him on the real origin of the German people, as they put that, to use the German people as basically the cattle to refuse the plans of the master race. So Satan basically came in the form of white alien beings, enlisting themselves as a nation called the Nordics, where they had a triangular-like symbol, and they basically were selling him on basically, you know, this is who you are, this is where we're from, and this is what we need you to do. And that's when he became more in tune with his beliefs. And this experience happened to him, I think it was about a month after the two witches named him as a chancellor. And this experience happened to him on Dietrich's property, I believe it was, because Dietrich was housing him at the time.
Oh.
And Dietrich actually witnessed that event occur. So he knew that Hitler was introduced to the area. In fact, he was rather jealous of it because they only wanted to talk to Hitler and not Dietrich. And that's why Dietrich remembered it so well. That's why it impressed on his head so well. So he had no problem surrendering his authority to Hitler because he felt blessed just to be there, as he put that. Dietrich was a sicko. So in that sense, that's the evidence, that's the written account of what we have concerning that.
And it's interesting because you just mentioned when he used to give his speeches, millions of people would be mesmerized. And in history, we learned that as an orator, he managed to captivate a lot of people, similar to like Nero from the Roman times. But what a lot of people don't seem, like we just discussed, don't seem to understand is that there's a spiritual side to it. And you really have to be like demon possessed, number one. Germany at one time was a heavily a Christian nation, but not Christian as you and I would know it. So many of them fell into his jive, in other words, and he managed to influence a major swath of that population because of his possession with Satan. Also, I noticed in history that he actually had tours looking for the New Atlantis because it was told to him that that's where he in other words, the German people and himself are not 100% human. They were like superhuman based on what was revealed to him by those demons.
That's what they were sold on. It was basically that if you look at the dichotomy of Germany at the time, Germany had two things going for them. They had a high degree of education, but here's the thing, what people don't want to understand, like, so many of the Germans learned actually from what we call the European Jews, the Khazarian people, the ones they basically persecuted. They taught them their knowledge, and then they took it to, basically used it to improve their entire culture. But then they became very politically orientated on athletics and on basically superiority doctrine. So what they did was they created another doctrine out of evolution, and then they called it eugenics. Now the eugenics doctrine is what it's like a doctrine that trains you to believe that you're superior. It's like going to the military and you're being trained to just think constantly that you're superior, that there's no question about it. You're smarter, you're faster, you're stronger. And you do these training spells over and over and over again. This is what Germany got into before Hitler got into power. And they became so focused on that it was like they became driven and successful in anything they did, because naturally, if you ever been an athlete or anybody who's been dedicated to one field, it's about getting better and better and better at it. But they took it like it's like some kind of massive mainstream yoga. They really went crazy with it. Oh. And then that was really because they lost World War I and they were decimated. They were mostly unemployed, so they had to find this other alternative thing to get into, and that's what they got into. They started to first it started off with self-improvement, and then it went really, really out there. And then now you add eugenics. Now the government wants to over-endorse eugenics, which is all about justifying scientifically why you think you're so superior. So now they got science backing them up on it, and their version of science. And then you bring the spiritual element into it. Now the occult groups have become very popular in Germany in the early 30s. So now their spiritual side and then you got Hitler, the rise of Hitler, pushing the propaganda. And what you got is a people completely transfixed on being the number one end-all, be-all in the world, because they've literally been programmed, conditioned, mind-controlled into that. So it doesn't take much for a bunch of demonic beings to come down in that type of setting and go, you're like that because you're not fully human. That's the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is you can't be fully human like everyone else is. So this is who you really are. And they'll easily believe that because they're already on the kick. They're already on that driven edge. And they need the outlet. And this is the outlet they find. It's an entire nation dedicating itself to a cause that appeals to them, and a cause that's making them feel good. And they got really, really high on it. And it was a high that they had a hard time coming down off of. And it took a world war to get them to come down from it, because their insuperiority showed that they lost the open war. Now, the shadow side of it is still undecided, but the open side of it was very decided. They were decimated. Their women were raped. They were destroyed. And that was a lesson for them. So the crimes did have punishments, but the consequences went on because other men were not held to account. But as for their claim of being, I guess, half human, that's not the accurate claim. The claim really is they were driven to think they were. And in many ways it could seem that way. But it's only because you take the resources away from others. You do not give. Others did not have that drive at the time because they were the victors. They were enjoying the spoils while they had to come up from the ashes. They should have took their self-help as something to improve themselves, but they really went way too far. And by believing in what they believed in, it drove the logic of what they were doing into absolute insanity.
Yeah, it's amazing. When you speak about the self-help, now, believing in yourself and being positive, most important of all, if you're a Christian, putting your faith in Christ and the abilities that He blessed you with and thinking positive is one thing. But I notice a lot of people, like the scenario you just pointed out, they take it to the point where they actually start to believe they're gods. And like, for example, you have Ted Turner, who actually believes that he's a god and believes that depopulation is the only thing that's going to save the earth. And you have a lot of these other people that we see that are famous who actually start to believe they're gods, like George Soros. He believes he's a god. You have Mike Zuckerberg, who said, if God does exist, then I'm it. You see, so when you start to see these people talk like that, it goes back to what you just said, which puts the piece of the puzzle together. If you continue to push yourself mentally like that, you actually start to believe this drivel that you're a god, which is right. So you're correct on that. That hasn't gone away at all yet, except that it's not as concentrated as it was during that time. Now, my next question to you, Michael, is this. Do you believe that during that time period, right before World War II and thereafter, technology exploded as we know it today?
Yeah, because what happened was that Hitler's shadow government at the time was requiring all kinds of pieces. The goal was to take Antarctica, and it was to take the underground caverns of Tibet, because there was a lot of stuff there. And when they went down into those caverns, they were able to acquire a lot of things. And that really, first off, they just had the pieces. Then they had to construct the companies that could supply the materials to reinforce their experiments. And all of this was being developed in the 30s and 40s, particularly during World War II. And that's why the technology arose out of World War II. Because when World War II was over, that's when a lot of this technology was lying around. But Germany loses the open conflict, so then it was like all this stuff was up for grabs. So then Russia got in there, then America got in there, then Britain got in there. And then they cut the country into three, and then for America to work better with the Western Alliance, they team up with Britain, so they cut the country in two. And then when we did this, that's when they were just trying to grab as many of their scientists, as many as their people, because they had the information to where these tunnel locations were at. Because Hitler had these vast tunnels built all underneath Germany and stretching even to other areas in Poland and Austria. And so the whole objective was, because one of the things the Nazis did during a lot of the shadow government cover-up when Berlin was about to be taken, is they started flooding all the tunnels. So when they flooded it, they were cutting off all the routes and all the locations to where these materials were at. And so that required the American shadow government to make deals with the scientists. And that also was the same thing for the Russians and the KGB. They did the same thing. And then MI6 with Britain at the time, they did the same thing. And what they wanted to do was to know where these locations were at, where is this technology at. Once we acquired it, then we had to spend, I'd say, about another 8 to 9 years developing our companies on the American side to develop it. So we were making better television, better telephones, better refrigerators, better freezers, better everything, better cars, better jet planes. And then what happens is that then we get more deeper into what the scientists knew and the secrets the Nazis had, and then we had a whole entire cloak and dagger operation and trying to track down where these Nazis were, and also hiding key figures from trials so that we kept them alive as a way to keep acquiring things until they were able to make that final deal where the American shadow government's real goal was to just make contact with the gods Hitler made contact with and pretty much take over the contract so that they would be able to acquire the technology to empower America and turn us into the most powerful nation in the world.
So, Operation Paperclip led to all of that, right?
Oh yeah, it was all about that. Yeah, the Paperclip's number one goal was to give these scientists what they wanted. I really don't like these men, but give these men what they wanted, and for the fact that they had the info. They knew what tunnel system it was, what the sections were, where the locations were at, and in exchange for what we gave them, they gave the American shadow government the information they needed. It was all about acquiring what the Nazi shadow government had, and that's why we did it. The other factor was the scientists had incredible knowledge because they were in touch with these mind control experiments, with these magnetic gravity experiments, and with these fusion experiments. They were already working with it before our scientists were, so our scientists were just completely curious. They were like, well, we want to know what you guys know, so it wasn't just tell us where this stuff is, we want you guys to come work for us. And so that's why they gave them homes and the big all that deal, because they were going to work for the American shadow government and do for the shadow government what they did for the Nazi shadow government.
So do you think this is the reason why we fast forward to today and we see we're living in what you would consider a soft Orwellian society where we're being spied upon all the time, and they basically know where we're at with our cell phones and things like that?
That's correct, because in Germany there was a lot of laws like that, where, there was laws that says you see some suspicious, tell the German SS, neighbors care about neighbors because neighbors watch neighbors, there was propaganda like that. And yeah, Germany had, at the time when Hitler was in charge, they were spying on the citizens, spying on the people. They had basically community watch in all these areas, and community watch was set up with phone lines directly to the SS. And they were to just monitor and spy on anything they saw that was not propaganda friendly. And so what we have in America is a similar deal, where this happened with our intelligence departments, because what happened with America was that since this all had to go to the shadow op, the military and military intelligence took it over. So military intelligence started infiltrating politics in order to exercise their agendas. So these agendas involved experimentations with mind control, military black ops, and basically programming people. And also testing, the latest technology they received. So in order to do that, they get people elected, they get people in certain positions, and then create certain laws, and then those laws would then allow them to continue on piece by piece with every progress they need to do. And it is very much a correlation of Germany taught them, the German shadow government at the time, I should say the Nazi shadow government at the time, taught them how to do that.
Wow. And we also see it, you made mention in one of your videos, that a lot of the people who create movies and put together these movies and programs, they basically, like for example, the last Marvel movie, The Winter Soldier, talks about Operation Paperclip. So a lot of these people who are involved in the occult produce movies like that, and they actually sell the the movies to us as fantasy, but when you tell them all of this stuff there's a lot of realism to this, they don't believe it.
Because it's in a movie, and that was actually done on purpose. Because at the time when MJ-12 and Majority 12 was first established with the Eisenhower group and the Truman group before them, the idea was they could never ever suppress the information. They never could. I mean, they could suppress a lot of it, but not 100%. What they had to do was come up with a way to triangulate these beliefs and misdirect the beliefs. So what they decided to do was, they're going to create a lot of truth within movies, but by putting them in movies, it would make people to be subconsciously to think that this stuff is fantasy. This stuff is just movies. This stuff is just television. And they reinforced that over and over and over again so that the information, or what you would call the apparitions, those things that they cannot control, that they cannot suppress, when they happen, they're banking on the fact that their misdirection tactics will work so well that people just naturally won't believe it. They'll naturally put their head down. They'll naturally not want to look at it. And that was really the aim of Hollywood. So why do these movies get $100 million? Why do these movies get such a crew of 1,000 people just to make a movie? You know, why is all this technology used in a movie? Why is even this truth in the movie? It's really as a misdirection product. It is really a distraction product. It is a product created to poison your brain so that when you do see it, it'll be so impressed, it'd be so impressive, and it would just stay in your head. And all you're going to think about is Captain America and his bullcrap, but that one truth that Captain America's dealing with, you'll still think that's Captain America's reality and not your reality. Because people are stuck in a movie. They're stuck on mind control.
Yeah.
So that's their problem. You see, because God always talked about idolatry and the fact you had to be careful about what you put before your eyes.
Right.
And since they're so addicted to this crap, the next thing they know is that when someone's telling them, look, these things are real. Operation Paperclip is real. It's a real unclassified document now.
Right.
You can go read all about it. No, I don't want to read that. No, but you want to watch Captain America. Yeah, that's your problem, man. That's what the government does to you. You know, because I know that for a fact. Because that's why they give Hollywood $100 million. You think Hollywood has $100 million? Have you seen LA? No, they don't have $100 million.
Right.
It's a budget that they're borrowing from so that they can make this crappy movie so that when I have to go and tell you the truth, you can tell me about Captain America.
Yeah.
Well, I grain in your head that it's just a movie taking a real essence, a real event. Because here's this other thing you can also tell people. Movies borrow from art form, and art form borrows from real life.
Correct. Yes.
Can't have art form without real life.
Right.
So what I usually challenge with them is, think of it this way. How did they make Captain America? Where was the idea based off of? How do you just go and sit down and go, I'm going to write this script called Winter Soldier, and hey, I got an idea. We'll just say like the Germans got into America through this thing called paperclip because I just pulled it out of my butt. Yes.
Yeah, that is true.
That's a way you can do that. It's really a way to get them to think, like, man, really think for a second about what you just saw.
That's right. That's right. And which leads me back to what we were talking about from the very beginning with your video on monsters. Same thing. They didn't believe me. They looked at me like as if I was one of those monsters. You know, like I was talking to them about Sasquatch, and they looked at me like, that doesn't exist. That's not real. And I tell them, yeah, it is. It is real. A lot of people do see it. And like with the chupacabra from Puerto Rico, which was, it looked like a little demonic creature that they found. And it's like what the Bible tells us, that the fallen angel beings are going to be messing with the human and animal genome and creating weird things. But like you just mentioned, Hollywood peppers their movies and programs with all of these things, and people think it's fantasy, something coming out of the TV.
Yeah, because they've been programmed to think that way.
Yeah.
That's what, like if you look at all the Spielberg movies, all the Lucas movies, or even the recent ones, look at their movies. It's the same stuff over again, just to reinforce to people that this is just a movie, it's all a fantasy, just go back to bed, there's nothing to see here.
Yeah.
Nothing to, these people that tell you that they're crazy, by the way, they're just, they're trying to screw with you.
Yeah.
So don't fear anything. The government loves you. At the end of it, we love you.
Yeah.
We just want to,
yeah, right.
and they fall for it. It's unbelievable that many people can understand the government committed horrible atrocities when they want to admit it. But when they wrap their head around those atrocities, they never want to connect the fact. What makes you think they're done? What makes you think that what they do in the past they're not doing now? I mean, where's the evidence on their claim to say that everything is fine? And even these movies they watch, look how violent that is. You don't think there's something wrong with that? It's really when you with what you're dealing with, we're showing them demonic entities or entities the Bible talked about being actually out there. Is the fact that since they weren't there to see it, that's where they want to go with. But then I always tell them, well, you weren't there to see Christ. You weren't there to see, Jesus rise from the grave.
Right.
You weren't there to see that, but you believe it. You know it's true. Also, how do we know you even exist? You weren't there to see your own birth, were you?
That's true. Then you'll have them going wacko away. You'll have them going cuckoo there for a second.
How do we know that's your mom? You weren't there to see that.
Right.
Someone else was, right? Someone else saw your birth and had to tell you that's where you came from. So tell me something, man. If I see something go down in South Africa, a big giant shark eating people, but yet I'm presenting that to you, but you don't want to believe it because you weren't down in South Africa, then how do we know you even exist? How do I know I'm even talking to you right now?
Right.
Who told you? Who told you I speak English? Is this really English we're talking? Maybe this could be Spanish, and Spanish could be English. Who told you?
Right.
You didn't create those languages, did you? It's these people who do that don't realize that they're brainwashed.
Yeah.
That they don't realize real intelligence in the world is not sticking to the text. It's thinking outside the box.
Correct.
It's creative thinking that will take you to locations where you see things you wish to God you didn't see.
Right.
But you ought to, because other people are being affected. The other thing you can hit them with is this. 199,000 persons a year in the United States goes missing, meaning their bodies are not discovered, there's no evidence of foul play, no evidence of anything. They're just gone. So tell me something. How is that possible? Worldwide, it's 4 million people.
Yeah.
So how is that possible? You see, what cops and evidence and motivation would tell us is that there's a killer out there and burying bodies and getting rid of them. So what we do is we track down where these people disappear, and what we tend to find is not exactly what we were prepared to see. And then this brings collaboration of witnesses, evidence, and photographs. But when you show that to people and explain it to people, still, they want to hit me with their ignorance. So all I can say is that that's really not completely their fault. I don't hate them for that. I never will hate them for that, because of the fact I know what the government did to you, and it's a sad thing because as a Christian, I have to bear it and witness it and see it.
Yep.
And it's,
Yep. That's true. And I go through that as well. They look at me as an oddball. But, when you have Christ Jesus as your Lord and Savior, He tends to open up your mind more. And, that's what I relate to them. In order for you to understand these things, you have to really, really meditate and ask the Lord to open your mind. Because if not, you're just going to be a mindless drone or one of those lemmings, that just follows the pack over a cliff. You can't be like that, So my next question, Michael, is this. In one of your videos, in the moon itself, we see the SS insignia. My question to you is, did the Nazis, or did the United States use Nazi technology to go to the moon, and were the Nazis the first ones on the moon? Because I noticed in your video they were building bases there in one of the pictures you showed.
Yep, the Nazis were the first. And in terms, not the first overall, but they did go there before us. They built a ship called the Hannibal 1. And the Hannibal 1 was a magnetic or gravity fusion ship. And for the people who don't know what magnetic gravity energy is, that's an energy to fuse light, to be heated up, almost with nuclear properties. And that really can launch you, almost like warp speed. It's not hard to do it. Once you have the components and the scientific numbers to do it, it is not impossible. And one of the things that people don't realize is that the Hannibal 1 is well classified. It's well documented. And most of what the scientists said in the Operation Paperclip in regards to basically interrogations on their part was that Hitler had a scientist assigned for the project. Hitler was mostly out of the loop once these scientists were established, and then they were being funded by outside, I believe it was like outside middle banks, which basically was a Rothschild family. So it was their pet project. And in their pet project, they had literally admitted that this ship launched to the moon and returned. And it returned for basically more materials, and then a secondary mission was launched during 42. And that's when Germany was winning the war. That's when we thought we were going to lose. And they really did have this presence that they were about to just conquer the world. And then a secondary mission was launched, and that wasn't even toward the moon. That was toward Mars. That was launched when they were losing the war in 45, and then which could explain why they don't return. And there are other accounts as well with that. But the scientists had too much information, too many details. They were presenting drill bits. They were presenting evidence. They were presenting materials that were actually used on the moon. We had moon rocks in America before anyone walked on it. So explain that, you know?
Yeah.
So this is something that people don't want to wrap their head around. That, you know, we had moon material before there was a Neil Armstrong. That means somebody went before us. And if you look at all the scientists talking about the Nazis were the one doing it, then we come to Warren Verdammer. Warren decides to help out America to build NASA. Now, how does he know how to build? How does Van Buren know how to build NASA? How does he know anything about space travel?
Yeah.
Well, because he has experience in it. And this is why he was able to be so effective in bringing us to the moon with NASA's crap, because of the fact that they had already been established. And the thing about the moon is that the God talks a lot about the orbs of the universe, that there is strangeness on there, that this is the angelic realm, that this is the realm of spirits. There is a prior history with all these things. And this is another thing that people can't wrap their heads around. So what we have here is that nations for centuries always had a shadow government. We talk about Egypt and Assyria, and they talked about their gods and their gods sending them to planets. And then we have the Nazis, and now us, you know, and we go to the moon right after we acquire everything we acquired from Paperclip. So it's just it's quite amazing when you think about it, but it's quite terrifying at the same time, because it's like terrifying if you really reflect on things that are just unsettling. If you believe that you want a safe, peaceful nation, that's where it's terrifying, because that is a secret that can't be kept for too long.
Wow. And these bases that were built by the Nazis, like you said, the moon and also on Mars, could those things be the things we are seeing now based on the videos you have shown us, the pictures you have shown us on some of the things in Mars and some of the things that are making it onto the internet?
What I got from my end, from what I have pictures of bases, pictures of ruins. Most of them are ruins, which is like shocking. It's like ruins from Noah's day.
Oh.
So most of them are ruins, but you got two active bases. One's in the shape of a swastika, and the other one's in the shape of two towers. Those aren't ruins. Those are active bases. The other one was also these laboratory bases that were also found in the Chronopolis crater. So we got bases, we got ruins. We also have seen demonic entities, mining vehicles, ladders, bridges stretching down into craters, water pits, places that are collecting water, crystal buildings, strange towers that seem to be still turned on, things of this sort. Ships, bodies. These are the things that we get back on the moon. And these are things not shown to people. And I remember the last video I did on the moon, I really wanted to show people what the moon even looks like, how the moon isn't even gray. It only looks that way from here because there's corruption here and there's basically chemtrails and geoengineering going on here. So the lights of the universe are actually blinded from our sight.
Oh.
So I want people to see that the moon is actually colorful. It actually arrays in 3 different colors. If people actually saw space, the stars are not just one color. The stars are various colors. The reason why they just look all bright and yellowish to us is because of the fact we have too many artificial lights. We have too many frequencies and too many light rays that all reflect and vibrate the atmosphere, and that's why we can't see it anymore. And the other thing is the moon is actually in a reverse position because someone reversed it, so that's a pretty disturbing concept. But in order for someone to do that means someone is on the moon, and meaning they're on the moon to the point that they have technology to actually manipulate the gravity stream of the moon, which was also prophesized because the moon is a connector to time. And this actually shortens time, and it actually makes people feel like time is racing them because there are things in the universe being manipulated by shadow forces, which is our government and Satan.
So, Michael, do you believe that we've been led to believe that, like, for example, I've always been told as a kid that there's no oxygen in the moon or on Mars. What do you say to that?
There's what you would call, the thing with the moon is that Earth has about 21% of oxygen, which is like enough for everyone to breathe. The moon does have oxygen, but it's at levels that are very dangerous. So what requires with the moon is that the evidence shows you have to, since it does have rain, since it does have that, since I borrow this from testimony, is that there's a decompression process that you have to go through, and then there's a chemical process that you have to go through, and that adjusts your body to be able to take in the levels of oxygen that are there, and also to take in the airborne anomalies that you would have to get used to. It's sort of like if you walk on the moon and pick up the dirt, this may do things to your hand, your skin that you may not be prepared for, because it's your skin touching the outside realm of dirt. It's outside your world. It's a different world, and you're not made for that world. So you've got to be chemically altered for that world. But once you go through it, you can walk and breathe on the moon, just as you would on Earth, if you go through those processes. The other thing is, let's say someone dumps you on the moon and you don't go through that. Well, let's say if you can survive what happens to you, over time, you become immune. But I'm sure you'd be disfigured and ugly by the time it's over with. So you would be changed. You would not even look human if that unfortunately ever happened to someone.
And you also mentioned the reversal of the moon. I've heard of that it's been reversed. Now, you think that this is a technology that's being done, that for the average person is unaware of, correct?
Yeah, because one of the things is that the moon has always been measured to be counterclockwise, and now it's gone clockwise.
Oh.
So it's been altered, So it's like it's been shifted around. So in order for someone to do that, that means they would have to take control of the 2 access points on the moon, which is the north and south. And if you notice, those areas are more on the dark side of the moon. And that's where a lot of these photographs come back with these colonies. So whatever they did, they basically got control of the 2 access points, manipulated the gravity field on the both ends, probably with a similar weather modification devices they may have. And then that was able to just tilt the axis and then just turn a reverse with the moon. And I think they did that to control elements of what they call time streams and light streams as a way to travel and even as a way to manipulate what other experiments are done.
And could that be why we're experiencing all this crazy weather throughout our planet? Because the moon does have an effect on the tides and things like that.
Correct. The evidence was, well, the main evidence was the fish, the ocean life. When we first noticed that the moon was shifted, this is when pounds and pounds of fish were dying, like thousands and thousands of fish in the ocean. Because what happens is if you do anything to the moon, it's the first areas it's going to affect is the waters. And then the waters are going to affect the plates. So that means more earthquakes, but that would also entail another sign, which would be a lot of dead aquatic life, which is what we found. There were so many dead aquatic life, there was no scientific explanation to why all these fish are just suddenly dead. Why birds were just dropping out of the sky in the same areas where the moon would affect the movements of the waters. That's because now the waters have been shifted again. And that will cause a lot of the aquatic life to be affected and poisoned and die. And that was, at that same time when that's happening, that's when we've noticed the moon was completely reversed. And it was like, oh my God. So it actually happened right under people's noses. It actually happened while people were just going to and fro. And they didn't even notice it. They didn't even, because they just don't care. And when people were telling them, look, man, there's like thousands of fish dead and there's no explanation. When fishermen were going to Congress complaining about it because they couldn't make a living anymore.
Right.
It was becoming very apparent there's something wrong, and the scientists didn't want to face the fact that the only other explanation for why it happened is that something happened to the moon.
Right. And also, Jesus prophesied these type of things happening. Now we fast forward to today, and we could basically have an explanation based on what we're discussing. Also, the second thing that I've noticed about all the dead sea life and fish life and all that was on one of your videos you mentioned about these mermaids that antagonize the underwater bases that's taking place right now as well. There's a lot of clandestine bases and cities in the bottom of the ocean that these mermaids antagonize, and they send out solar pulses to get rid of them or something, and it affects the sea life as well.
That's correct.
Okay.
That particular incident, well, the one I know about was an incident that occurred with the Navy. What happened was the Navy does have a sea base, and it's a classified location. And what happened was is that they had some type of attack going on at the time. And so how they thwarted the attack was they sent out these high-frequency sonic sounds that were basing the water, where like the sound is like if somebody would just took a speaker and turned it on in your ear, it would like cause the inner lobe of your mind to explode.
Wow.
So this was real traumatic stuff. And they sent this out at such high decibels that it actually shook the ships that were above the water, and people picked it out. And then this set like large animals like whales and other creatures to be frothed off to the shore because they've been brain dead. Their brains exploded.
Wow.
And even their guts. So they just came up the water. But the other thing that came with these whales were these dead sirens, or what people call mermaids. And they were also scattered across. And this was a literal attack from our government on them for whatever it was they were doing. And then there were the similar accounts had taken place. Those accounts don't have too much information on, but I do know that they were actual like military encounters that have been classified for this particular moment. The other accounts that took place was with the scientists. The scientists have also bases. Some of them are publicly known, and some of their equipment is well known. And so when they went down there, they started basically encountering them themselves. And this started happening after the sonic attack. And what they believed was that the Navy may have used too many of these frequencies at the time, that it may have caused a lot of the demonic element of the ocean to kind of shift around itself. So now they're like looking for new habitat. So now they're like encountering things. Now they're encountering people they normally wouldn't. And now they are. So I think they're kind of seeing the new operations going on under the oceans as an intrusion to their territory, as they want to put that.
Right, because these entities basically are like the Nephilim in the Old Testament. They're basically hybrid creatures Which
Correct.
they can be killed, right?
Yeah, they can be. They're demons. And they can be killed. Well, killing most demons are killed by the beheading or the destruction of their lower lobe. Those are the two areas that kills them. And what you're doing is killing the shell. So that does stop them right through. Because then they come into a spirit form, and now they got to deal with the angels, and then that's another thing. But anything within the shell can be killed. It's just that it's hard to kill them. The thing is, you got to know where to strike.
It's like when David slew Goliath, right?
Say again?
It's like when David slew Goliath, the rock got right into the middle of the skull, and then he proceeded to chop the head off.
The way that went, basically, that's right. When David threw the stone sinks into the forehead of Goliath. But if you notice what God is saying about it is that it sinks into Goliath's head, meaning God declared the victory because he turned that stone into like a real red hot poker, like a lava ball,
Right.
Like when David threw it, that rock became something else, and then when it impacted Goliath's head, it literally sank into his head. But of course, anything that sinks into your head, it's going to come out of your lower lobe. So to imagine it, Goliath gets hit in the forehead, and then the bullet comes out the back of his head.
Wow.
And that's how he died. So when he hit the ground, David went up to him, but David still not sure because maybe it didn't, fracture the lower lobe all the way. So to make an example out of him, I'm going to finish him off. I'm going to cut his head off. And that'll finish it because that'll be it.
Yeah.
And then when he cut his head off, that was it. That terrified all the Philistines. I'm sure that even the first impact terrified them because they actually started running as soon as Goliath hit the ground. So it was like, imagine somebody with a slingshot and it works like a gunshot.
Right.
It blows his head off, and so you're like, oh, we're out of here.
Right. It was like the giant of Kandahar. Those military guys were shooting it in the face, and it took a while to take him down.
Yes, their encounter was also a lesson learned, and it was sad too because I think they were confident in going into it that they thought they could just cut him in half. Because when they saw how big he was, they just aimed for his waist and his chest, but it didn't have any effect. And then that's the lesson learned on that. That you can shoot those in certain areas. You can shoot them all day long, and nothing won't happen. Because that's just not a vital organ to them. That's not going to happen. So what happened was they were shooting at it for about 30 seconds, and when it didn't do, which is like a long time, when you're using those type of weapons, because usually that's a one-hitter quitter. That should drop you right in a second.
Right, they'll tear you up.
Right, so imagine you're going 30 seconds with 30 caliber rounds, and you're going, dude, why isn't this guy gone down yet? And then he jumps down from the platform with his spear, and he kills one of the soldiers. So he impales him, and he's like holding him up in the air, And then at that moment, one of the sergeants who spoke to L.A. Mazzari about it, he testified that the soldiers collectively had a feeling to start aiming for his head. And then they said once they did that, they had better results. They were able to take him down in 15 seconds. So they were just unloading on his head, and then that's when the bullets started striking the lower lobe, and then that's when he dropped.
Oh. Wow. And these things, slowly but surely, are beginning to reappear. People are actually seeing these things.
Correct. That's why people got to start waking up, because this is not going to be covered up for very long. You got military, United States military coming out telling you, hey, look, we fought them. We killed them. We know it's real. You got military coming out saying they had to take ships out of Afghanistan. Literal dish-safe ships out from the caverns.
Wow.
So we can see these giants are doing that because they feel like their territory is being trodden on, and maybe in some way it is, but at the same time they're an abomination. They're not supposed to be. We're at war with them anyway, so I don't really acknowledge whatever the hell they think is theirs. But all I know is that if you got a military going in stealing from them, there's something wrong with that too.
Right.
So it's like it's a deadly, horrible game that's been bottled up for too long, and now the water is overflowing. They can't cover it up for too long.
Yeah. Well, Jesus said that in the end times, knowledge will increase, and that's what's
Correct.
happening. That's one of the reasons why we see these idiot politicians trying to control our internet access, trying to ban certain things, because there are people like yourself and many wise, intelligent people who know and are teaching others. You can't hide these things. Jesus said knowledge will increase, and we're beginning to see. Now, as knowledge increases, we don't see wisdom increasing. You see, you have to have one without. You have to have both, because if you have knowledge, then for example, when I teach them on these things, on monsters and things like that, they don't have the wisdom to understand, so they just brush it off. So you need first of all the wisdom of Christ, which will open up your mind to the knowledge, and you get to piece the puzzle together. Am I right on that, brother?
That is absolutely correct. You need wisdom to know this stuff, because it's one thing. Because I've seen a lot of people with great knowledge, but will actually show a lot of ignorance to a lot of other things. Like I had a good friend of mine who was a dentist, and he had great knowledge, but my work was always controversial to him. And like you, he would look at me a little crazy. He respected me, but he would kind of look at me a little nervous. Like one time he told me, Mike, I don't believe anything. I just can't believe that. And many times I just challenge him. And one day I made him a little tiffy, a little angry, because I did say that to him. I was like, well, that's because you've got no wisdom. I mean, you don't in anything. I mean, let's just face it, man. If someone came to you and said, do I need some help, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do, pull his teeth out?
right. Maybe as a form of self-defense to get out, probably, right? If he's
he's like, well, okay, well, all right, well, we can't all be on internet, right? And I was like, well, it's not about me being on the internet, it's about you don't know. So I can't convince you unless you get more wisdom and you get more spiritual with yourself about what's going on, because you ain't going to learn about the world in this office. Right. I'm out of this office, man. I'm out of this neighborhood, man, and I'm out there. And I don't see you, my friend, So yeah. I can understand why you look at me the way you do. I totally get it, man. I totally understand, but bro, you gotta understand, you need to increase your wisdom and realize that, if I have a profession in this, there's a reason why.
Right.
Just like you have a profession as a dentist, that's because people need their teeth fixed. And I have a profession in this because people are encountering this and they need an explanation. And I can give them one.
Right.
So there you have it. So here's the check.
So, Brother Michael, the Lord Jesus is using you big time. So, one of the things that attracted me to your videos and your channel was the demons, the aliens come from hell video you put together. The moment I saw that, I said, holy cow, this guy is truly, he's amazing. I mean, you were doing things nobody else would even touch upon,
Yeah, because it was just needed at the time,
yeah.
And I have to say it was just needed, like a lot of people are crying out, going, can someone explain this? Can someone explain this? And when you go to these people, you're like, well, what happened? And then they tell you what happened, and it's like, man, these people went through hell, and then I even count my own experiences because that's how I can relate, so it's like, right. You feel sorry for them because it's like you wanted someone to feel sorry for you at the time because it was terrifying to deal with.
Yeah.
And then they got to deal with it. So it's sort of like, well, I'm stronger now, so here's what I can do. And that's why we really did it, because I was only telling them at the time, look, there's no way it's going to fix the problem, but all we can do is just expose it and face it together, face it like men and women, and do what we need to do. And then, because I realized that this is a club that no one wants to be part of. This is a thing no one ever should be, but they are.
Right.
So here we are,
right.
And so we got to deal with it. So I really did that whole thing for them, for the victims, and for the people who know, because they know, And I didn't really, it was a ministry because God turned it into His ministry, His word. That, you're not saving souls, you're going to be doing more than that.
Yeah, it's amazing because I classify you as a watcher, incredibly mature Christian. You are totally and completely on meat, steak. You see?
Yeah.
you basically understand, you have a complete 360 view of everything and how things are pieced together. In other words, you can see in front of you what's happening on our third dimensional realm, and also comprehend and understand what's going on the fourth dimension. You see, whereas there are other Christians who are still on baby formula. They don't understand these things. They're not ready to comprehend these things. These are the battles within the Christendom. You have those like you and I who are basically eating meat, and we try to teach those who are still on pablum. They don't get it. They think Christ is this touchy-feely God, and you can continue to do your silly little things, and God is good and kind. He's going to forgive you, and you go outside when church is over, and you go home, watch television, and everything else is fantasy.
Yeah, that's what's sad. That's like most people, because they got their head on and stuck in the clouds.
Yeah.
Like too many movies, too many music videos, too much stupid stuff.
Yeah, stupid
like
nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah, you got it. So it's like that's what you often deal with, and I think that's why we were put in the positions we were put in, because it was a way to just reach them. Because even though they don't understand you now, believe me, down the road they're going to.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, I hope these seeds, like you're doing, these seeds get planted, and somewhere along the line they begin to sprout, and people will begin to see these things, because that's...
Yeah, they're going to... Yeah, because they have a choice down the road. They're just not going to have a choice.
Absolutely. Now, my next question, Michael, is getting back to the Nazi technology, the technology of the hollow earth. You've mentioned that Hitler created some caverns. Was he trying to create these caverns to communicate with these demons in the hollow earth?
What it was is he was going to Tibet. And if we talk about the tunnels he built in Germany, a lot of that was to reconnect with certain areas underneath Europe where there were these demonic beings living under the mountains. And one of the ranges of these tunnels that it stretches under a lot of the German mountains. So there was a connector there. Another connector was in Tibet, because the Tibetan Lama Society actually is built over the entrance, where they can actually go down and talk to these beings. And that's what drew the Nazis there. Antarctica has another one, too, where the middle section of Antarctica, the one that's not mapped, that's why it's so hard to find. But once you do find it, there's an entrance there. And it's right in the middle of these brown rocks, brown-type mountains, and there's a warm lake right in the center. That's actually where it is. And so they actually do live in caverns underneath the mountains, even where I'm at in North Carolina. There are a series of mountains where there's an entrance right on Native American property, on a Native American reservation. And there's Native Americans, from what I know, in the underground where, if you talk to them right, and if you know certain people, and if you can keep your mouth shut, they'll take you to them. Oh. But of course, you'll be on Native American land, and so America doesn't have jurisdiction there internally. So it's pretty much at your own risk. Oh. And in many cases, if we notice where these places are built, why they choose to build it underground, it's really just to get in touch with them, because they're there, they live there. And the Bible verifies this, that the demonic host does have a world that's called the abyss, and the abyss is translated as a hollow world. A world that's hollow, but it's deep and dark and underneath our world, and that's why it's called the abyss, because it lies underneath the earth, and this is where these demons are. So the abyss is real, but people don't realize what the abyss really is. They kind of think of some place in the ocean, but they never want to think, but actually, no, it means a hollow world that's underneath. So we're talking mountains, we're talking caves, we're talking places like that where they dwell.
And there was this guy, he was a geologist. His name was Phil Schneider. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he talks about, he went on, and this is going back about 22 years ago. One of the things that had him quit his geologist job with the government was one day he had to go to this meeting, and it was in one of the hollow cities underneath the earth. They have an actual city. where they had like a United Nations auditorium. So they invited him to go. He had clearance to attend this meeting. So when he was in the audience waiting for the politicians or whoever was going to show up to speak, he asked one of his colleagues, "What's taking them so long? Everybody's here." So he says, "No, we're waiting for them to come." He says, "Them who?" And then when he looks up, he sees these whites, these alien whites, he calls them, with the long necks. About 6 of them take seat right behind the people that were going to start talking. When he saw that, he says, the country is working against American interest. That's what propelled him to quit and go on the speaking tour. But there were, I believe, 13 attempts on his life. The 14th one was the one that did him in. And he talks about there's about 9 races of aliens, as he calls them. And they're basically on the hollow earth. He had a shootout with one of them when he was digging deep into a mountain. And he said that when they opened up this tunnel, it stunk like sulfur. And as he was lowered down, he found these aliens. They were like reptilians, and he had a shootout with them.
Yeah, that's a real account. Because what happened was Phil was part of a government project, basically, to build the tunnels that would later turn into underground cities. So he was part of that work crew that were drilling those tunnels down there.
You mean the underground cities for the elites, because the average person will not have access to these things, right?
That's correct. Yep. Yeah, I should say that. You're right. That's correct. That the average person doesn't even know where they're at, and if they even get close, they'll probably be shot. You know, it's a special invite. It's a special invitation, and that's why it was so secretive. That's why a lot of the workers ended up just disappearing or dead under mysterious. Well, Phil was more outspoken, so we know what happened to him. But others were not so fortunate, and that was all just to cover up a lot of the work they did, because they were cutting in straight down into these mountains where these entities had been down there for thousands of years. So they were just running into them, and these violent encounters would take place. You know, so a lot of the guys that had to drill, they were usually armed, you know, and they had to come down there. They had to have some sort of military training, or at least learn how to shoot. And yeah, they were paying a lot of money, but it just wasn't really worth it. I mean, a lot of guys died. A lot of guys who survived it ended up sick, caught cancer and other things later on. Because, you know, when you're down there's a lot of things that could enter your body that you may not even be aware of. Like sulfur is one. Like, breathing in sulfur will screw you up. Yeah. You know, like, that'll do some stuff to you. You know, and you got those type of gases, and along with sulfurous gases, that was another problem they were running into. And that's another thing you find deep in the pockets. And it was bad. You know, and Phil's encounter was real unfortunate. You know, I mean... but his testimony was mind-blowing.
And it's amazing. I don't think he was a Christian, though, because he kept on calling these alien races. You and I understand that they're demons.
Correct. That was a problem that my group had a falling out with Phil. But this was before I was even part of the group in terms of the Christian side of it. So from what I understand, because I wasn't there on that, I wasn't even a Christian at that particular time. So this was right before my time. So from what I heard about it, was that, you know, Phil just wouldn't come around to a belief in God. You know, he was very, very atheist-like and bitter. One guy put it that the guy was bitter. He was bitter about the situation. Just, you know, he would be cynical about it. You know, like, oh, God just likes, you know, humans getting eaten by demons, I guess. Or just God just loves that. He had that side to him, you know, and I just kind of leave it alone. I thought to myself, well, it's going to be between him and God,
right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, he didn't understand the God does not take any joy in any of these things. These are the things, it is what it is. I mean, you know, mankind is a fallen creature, and God tells us not to mess with them, but mankind still does. That's the reason why governments are building hollow places, and because basically they're getting their marching orders from these entities. They have to build these cities because they believe that they're going to be saved. They're making pacts with them, thinking that they're going to be saved, because a lot of these demons understand that their time is short. And Jesus is going to come and open a holy can of whoop-ass on all of them. So,
What happened? Yeah, and it's even happening now.
Yeah.
And it's no doubt it's going to happen. They are on borrowed time, and they know they are. When you got them acting out in such ways, and you got all these elitists acting so giddy, so nuts, and psychopathic, it's very clear. It's all running out of time, because this is a suppression that just can't last.
Right.
That's the thing about it. And once it's all out in the open, there'll be new political ways that people will enforce, and it's going to be intense. The only deliverance is Christ.
That's it.
Or Christ set up somebody in a situation to be able to survive that, or at least live during that. The other ones are, people don't realize that sin will subject you to judgment. I still think Phil would still be with us today if he wasn't so hard about God.
Right.
That was the thing I always thought about. I even thought that with Bill Cooper. Bill Cooper was a Christian, but he had, he was apex, man. He didn't like people on property. And I don't blame him. I'm like that too. But I always feel like if Bill was just a little more patient and just let the FBI do their stupid crap and then let them drive off, he'd be with us today.
Yeah.
But guys tend to make mistakes because of the fact they get too frustrated and they get too overwhelmed when this stuff happens. And that's why I really feel like disclosure has to happen, because too many lives are affected.
Yeah. And, brother, let me ask you another question. This is interesting. You see how the country is running a monster-sized deficit? Do you believe the Hollow Earth Project is a contributing factor to our major deficit? They just don't mention it?
Yeah, it's a spending factor. We're spending too much money in too many areas. So we put ourselves in this debt, but and at the same time we control the oil reserves to keep us afloat. So we still have this claim of being the richest nation in the world, but yet we're the most highest in debt in the world, which doesn't make sense. And that's because of the fact that our military basically tells the world, well, we're still number one, and don't forget that, otherwise you're not getting any oil and you may get bombed. We really are becoming bullies. And this is how we're handling the debt problem. This is how we're handling things. We're not looking to pay things off because we're spending too much on experiments and other things in order to push the agenda as fast as it can go.
Yeah.
So that we would just collapse the dollar and then force ourselves into globalization.
Yeah.
Which is why they put this Hillary in position.
Right.
Which really was for that, I don't know, in terms of what Trump is going to do, but from my understanding, he's part of another puzzle, to this whole thing.
Yeah.
So it really is just them just orchestrating events to blind you from what's really happening.
Yeah.
So our debt will eventually wipe away, but how it will wipe away will be a controversial decision. Is it going to be wiped away by us folding into another economy, or is it going to be wiped away because we bombed somebody?
Yeah.
It's going to be one or the other. I mean, it doesn't seem like we have politicians looking to really resolve this peacefully.
Yeah. And it seems like since 9/11, 15 years ago, since that happened, America and our daily lifestyle as we know it has changed drastically now. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's totally changed. You got kids that think being, gay or being indifferent or being atheist, or you just rejecting their culture outright, or rejecting their sex, or rejecting themselves, is completely normal.
Yeah.
For people to think that way, that tells you already this family structure is not what it used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, those maintaining it are really maintaining a defiance, a resistance toward what they're seeing all around them. Like they're saying, well, your kid's gay, but my kid ain't doing that. Well, your wife wants to sit there and run the pants in the family. I'm not doing that.
Right.
Or your son is out there being feminine. My son ain't doing that. Or your daughter's out there being masculine. My daughter's going to be a lady.
Right.
This is what we're bouncing back and forth. And then now when children want to go and learn about God, they get humiliated.
Right.
They get ostracized in school.
Yeah.
And really for no reason, by a bunch of kids that don't know anything about anyone. So where are they getting all their God hatred from?
You know what it is too, Michael? The education system, especially here in New York City, they're hiring a bunch of people, like we just discussed, maybe knowledgeable in their subject area, but are complete dolts when it comes to overall wisdom and knowledge. They know nothing. I work in the education system, and I had not a confrontation, but a monster debate with one guy who's a communist and an atheist. And he was counseling a kid, talking about, because he was born in the Bible Belt. Apparently his family is a Christian. So he's in his 40s, and he said, I don't believe in none of that nonsense. So I looked at the guy, and I said, you're pretty old to be rebelling against your parents, because from what I understand, your parents are Christian. Now, what is it about God that you have a gripe against? He says, he doesn't exist. I said, really? He doesn't exist? Well, that shirt you're wearing, did it make itself? I mean, seriously, because he was telling me about evolution. And I said, that's a farce. You're telling me that shirt you're wearing appeared. And it's simple in its construction. Now, if you look at the human body with all its complexities, you mean to tell me over millions of years we came about? I said, that's stupid, I said to the guy. And I told the kid, I said, look, get to know the Lord. Because once you know Christ, as a man, you know what your purpose is in life. And a lot of people don't like, secularists mostly, they believe that men and women are exactly the same. That's another topic. And I tell them, no, they're not. We're not the same. Jesus did not create men by mistake. Like, for example, myself and you. When we look at each other in the mirror, this is not an accident. God didn't say, I'm going to create Michael Hur, a guy, and I'm going to create this other person, a girl. No, he says there's a reason why he created you as a guy. And as you can see, based on your ministry and your videos and all of that, you are exercising exactly what God created you to be, which is an alpha Christian male, teaching, preaching, leader of his household, a real man. That's how I see you. I respect you as a real man, an intense apex alpha male Christian. And that's our role. You don't just take a back seat like a Delta quisling little wimp. You don't do that. God does not want that, you see. And again, I talk to a lot of young men in church about this, and many of them don't have a clue. That's why, like we just mentioned, a lot of the young guys and girls are disenfranchised. Why? Because they don't know God. People make fun of them. And if you take that away from them, now you really don't know your role. Really. You don't, as a guy or as a woman. You see? One of the things I taught in a Christian couples Bible study was that Jesus comes first, then the man is answerable to everything, because God is going to come to you first whenever stuff goes down. The woman comes second, then the family. And a lot of them argue that point. I said, don't argue that, because if you look carefully all the way in the book of Genesis, who did God go to first when Eve tempted Adam after they fell? He came to Adam first, right? And then Adam began the victimization blame game, saying, look, it was the woman you gave me. You see? It's no different than today. No different than today. You see, a man has to be a man. You don't pass the buck. You take responsibility. Most important of all, you talk to the Lord to help guide you so that you won't make the mistakes. But if you do, you fess up like a man and you move forward. This victimization culture is also what's destroying the country. And it's quite pathetic.
It is. I mean, people have to realize that when bad things happen to you, you can't use that as the excuse to continue on, like you said, taking the back seat. God doesn't raise up weakness. Eventually men have to become soldiers. Men have to become men.
Yeah.
It's a reality. It's a lot of people don't realize that. Like particularly young men today. They're raised by mothers that really suppress that side of them. And not realize or really get them to be effeminate in some way. Like experimenting with taking women's fashion and turning it into for boys. Think sword. This right here is this confusion. And then it's a denial of your heritage and a denial of who you are. All men, no matter the size, shape, creed, or color. They were made with purpose. They were made to be fathers. They were made to be brothers. They were made for a reason.
Yeah.
And that is a reason that people have to discover. And that's their relationship with God. You know, like Adam became a man because he was willing to take his mistakes and turn it into faith, turn it into struggle, you know, and he bled and sweat and became what he became because of the fact he believed enough that God would see him through and to accomplish his goal to find out who Adam really is. And men are patterned in this way. You know, you're patterned through the blood and the sweat and the pain. It's not to say that that's coming on you because you deserve it. It's to say more like it's coming on you because man sinned, and sin exists within you. And you will sin. And this is the way we can come out of it, you know. So sometimes when I think about things done to me, I had a lot of abuse done to me. I can claim a lot of victim stuff. I can go on and on and on about it. But I'm not going to live that way because that would be weakness. That never would have made me who I am today.
Correct.
If I sat and cried all day like, you know, this happened to me, that happened to me. You can't be that way. You know, I have to look at that and go, no, I survived it. So let's continue on, you know. And the more and more people don't realize that sometimes our pain defies us. Sometimes our pain teaches us. Sometimes it teaches us in ways that makes you a lot stronger. It makes you more humble. It makes you more ready. And that makes you into a man. It makes you into something more than a boy.
Right.
You know? And then this is what they don't know because they're not being raised by men.
Right.
They're being raised by women and being raised by effeminate men.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Agree with you totally, 100%.
Yeah. And we'll delve into that topic next time. Because, I have the utmost respect for you. Every time I put on your videos, I say, there goes a real man. God bless him. Because you're putting yourself out there amongst people who basically don't like what you have to say. And I face the same thing as well. But, again, many will respect you. And most important of all, Jesus will protect you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Well, I have the highest regard for you. I truly care about you very much, and I pray to the Lord that He continues to bless you and your home, your wife, your family, and you keep on moving forward like a ram. You see, Jesus says we have to be like gentle, like a sheep, but at times you got to be like the male sheep, the ram. You see, the ram, a mountain lion thinks it twice before hunting him because he knows he's in for a fight. So that's how we got to be.
That's right. That's 100% right. Yeah. I respect you too. I respect what you're doing too. That's not easy to show that video to the audience you're showing it to, and then to endure that, and then to be patient and to come back and teach them week after week, man. Absolute respect for you. Yeah. That's hard.
Thank you, brother.
No problem, man, because that's never easy. You know, like, I think about your work, and I'm like, I had to do that years ago, and I thought to myself, God, I would not want to really do it. I would, but God, I respect you, bro. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's man. Yeah. Definitely.
Okay, brother, so it was a great conversation with you. We're definitely going to do it again, because I really enjoy talking with you. Okay, until next time, I want to say God bless you, okay?
God bless you too. I'll see you now. We want to see you.
Okay, brother. God bless you. Okay.